Hello, everyone. It might be morning or evening wherever you're at, but currently, right now, it is midday when I'm recording this. I wanted to just take a second to thank everybody for so much support and love and everything during my last video. It was a little bit nerve-wracking to make a video in your basement, not knowing what you look like or how the backdrop is affecting anything. So thank you for all of your support. All the people that have said this really meant a lot to them. It meant a lot to me too, honestly, to continue making these messages and videos for you. Today is called Fear Part 2. My other one should have been called Fear Part 1. So if you haven't seen the last video, you should probably go and look at it right now because it has a lot of the same elements as this video. But this is Fear Part 2. And it's kind of fitting that it's called Fear Part 2 because we're currently in the second week of the quarantine. And what's really funny about it is that honestly, you're not supposed to be quarantining yourself. You're supposed to be outside and that kind of thing. At least that's what I've read. You might have read something else. I don't know. I've been running. Our family's been out doing things, and I've noticed more people than ever outside, getting exercise, talking to their neighbors. I don't honestly see a negative impact on that point. Now there's a lot of other negative impacts going on. Maybe you right now are sitting at home because you're out of work. Maybe your company sent you home. I know a lot of people like that. Right now as a teacher, I'm working from home, which is actually a little bit more frustrating than it sounds like because I'm having to coordinate with my team over little chats and things online. So it's a frustrating time for everyone, but it does have some bright points. This has been a very good week in the Pacific Northwest weather-wise. So maybe you've gotten out and done some things to take your mind off the weirdness of what's going on right now. But I hope this video catches you where you are. Whether you are reconnecting with your family or whether you're worried about going back to work and what it means to not have a steady income. I hope this video meets you right where you're at. I hope that God can meet you right where you're at this week. So today we're in 1 Kings. We're in 1 Kings 17. I don't often do thematic messages because I like to just go passage by passage in the Bible. But honestly, with everything that's been going on, it makes more sense to kind of pick and choose. But we're not picking and choosing for the sake of picking and choosing. I just want to tell you the story about how Elijah was helped by God. Now, it says that there's, first of all, going to be a great drought in the land, and when I was reading through things this week, that kind of struck me because I kind of went, yeah, we're kind of in a drought right now. We're not in a drought per se as water is not falling. There's no precipitation, or there's problems with our water, and we can't water our crops, and we're kind of worried about how the summer is going to look. But there is kind of a drought if you think about it. If you've been watching your bank account and watching it dwindle because of lack of a job, you know about a drought. You know that there's more than one drought in this world. And last week we actually talked about money, but not in the sense that you would think. We talked about you having a spiritual checking account and a spiritual savings account, and that God is the bottomless pit of that spiritual savings account. But we kind of, at least me, I like to fill up my checking account with all of my personal resources. And then as soon as they're gone, then I go to my bottomless savings account that is God and I say, God, help me, right? Because I don't have anything left. When actually, I should be going to God in the first place, thanking Him for the ability to produce wealth. This time has really given me a lot of sense of gratitude toward God for allowing me to have a job that pays, that pays me money. It is so simple, but having a car that starts in the morning, having a house that you wake up and you're not freezing cold because you don't have any heat, but that we have houses and cars and things like that, just praising God that I have the material wealth that I do, even though I might not be as wealthy as some. But today we're turning to what you do in a drought. But not only that, something is going to happen to Elijah when he encounters a lady in this story. So I'll just let the story speak for itself in 1 Kings 17. Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, "As the Lord the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain for the next few years, except at my word." This is kind of a self-imposed drought almost, because he's saying that God is going to help me maintain this drought over the lands. That's a little bit interesting. I think we'll come back to that a little bit later. In verse 2, it says, "Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Leave here, turn eastward, and hide in the sorry, I'm having trouble pronouncing things. In the Kerith ravine east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have directed the ravens to supply you with food there." So he did what the Lord had told him. He went to the Kerith ravine east of the Jordan and stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the mornings, and bread and meat in the evenings, and he drank from the brook. Now I like that it doesn't say, please go to this brook where you're going to be in total isolation, and the ravens are going to bring you all that you need for a day. Like, they're just going to bring it for you there, and you're going to have to ration it out, because I think that would have given too much to Elijah. That's not how God works. If we ever think, and personally, if I ever think, God, I have everything I need, I'll see it when I need something else, right? All of a sudden, I've taken everything I own and put it into my personal checking account, really. And I'm just telling God, basically, you're kind of what we use as a last ditch. But as soon as all of my personal possessions run out, I'm coming back to you, I promise. Because I know, I deep down, I know that you provide me all that I need. Now, if I did that, of course, God is going to allow all of my personal resources to dwindle back to nothing, because he's going to meet me where I am, and he's probably going to say, we need to be in relationship. So I'm going to make sure that all your resources are dependent on me again. And this is what he's doing. This is what God's doing. God is not giving Elijah a whole bunch of stuff and telling him, wait right there, you are in charge of rationing out your supplies. He's telling him, I will send you ravens. I will send one in the morning and one in the evening. You will be completely reliant on me, because currently it's a drought and you're right by a brook. But not only that, you can't move, because the ravens are going to meet you there, and they're going to give you everything that you need for a day, but just what you need. Just what you need. It's kind of reminiscent of the manna. That's also when Moses is needing to feed his people. Manna comes down from heaven, and they're able to fill baskets with it. But God specifically tells Moses, you can't save this stuff. It will be eaten up by worms, in fact, if you try and save it. You need to be completely reliant on me. And that's how our relationships with God should be. We should be completely reliant on him, because that's true relationship, isn't it? So he did what the Lord had told him. He went to the Kerith ravine, and backtracking a little bit, east of the Jordan, stayed there. Ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. Sometime later, the brook dried up, because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him, "Go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon, and stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food." So he went to Zarephath. When he came to the town gate, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and asked, "Would you bring me a little water in a jar, so that I may have a drink?" As she was going to get it, he called, "And please bring me a piece of bread." "As surely as the Lord your God lives," she replied, "I don't have any bread. Only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat and then die." This widow is living on her last grain. She's got nothing else. God did send his servant and his prophet to be fed by this lady, but it seems like he almost sent his prophet to the wrong person, right? Now, of course, this reminds me personally of times when I've thought to myself, I need to help. And in this kind of time as well, I need to help. But then every day, and you might know this if you have a smartphone, which everybody does, and you've been checking your news feeds, If you've been checking your news feeds, you know that stores are closing, restaurants are closing. I was just at Fred Meyer a few days ago, and they said, get all that you can. What they didn't say is, we're going to be closing soon, but that's what my panic was telling me, right? What if the stores close? What if I can't get food from my family? But what if my neighbor needs my help? That kind of tugs at me, doesn't it? Because as a believer, I'm supposed to help anyone that needs anything. But then I go to God and I say, look, God, I can't take care of myself. How am I supposed to help someone in need? That's the same thing that's going on in this widow. God may have come to her, we don't know, and probably said, hey, so my servant is coming to stay with you for a little while, and he needs to be supported by you. He needs to eat and he needs to drink. And she might have even said to God at that point, why do I care? Your servant, you can go feed him yourself. I have my own problems. And she does. She says, I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son that we may eat and then die. They are so far gone that they are starving in this story. Why did God send Elijah to a starving widow to beg the last piece of bread from her? Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have and bring it to me. Then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. So she went away and did just as Elijah had told her. So there was food every day for Elijah and for the woman and for her family. She's just talking about feeding her son, right? She's condensed everything so far down that she says, look, all I can do is I can feed my son, and then that's it, and I'm going to die. It doesn't say anything about her family, because she has a family to feed apparently, but she doesn't argue with Elijah. She does just what he says. As a believer, we need to do the same thing. During this time, if my neighbor comes to me, or if someone I know comes to me, or not even comes to me, a lot of us are pretty proud here in the good old United States. We can take care of ourselves, thank you. But you begin to notice cracks. You begin to notice that, your neighbor hasn't been out in a few days. Maybe you don't have a neighbor. Maybe you live out a ways, and you're personally hurting, but you've been on Facebook or Instagram, and you've seen that someone near you is struggling. Maybe they got laid off. Maybe their boss sent them home. Maybe they're right now they're trying to, wait in that giant line for unemployment and look for unemployment. And they're struggling. As someone that likes to plan ahead, though, you might be thinking, and I'm talking to myself, you might be thinking, well, God, I don't know when this is going to end. But as the Bible also says, isn't your body more than the food you eat and more than the clothes that you wear? Don't the birds, aren't they wonderfully fed and aren't they wonderfully clothed? Doesn't God care about them? And doesn't he care more about you than a bird? Of course he does. So maybe, just maybe, God is using you like he was using Elijah and the widow. They ministered to each other. Elijah took pity on her, I imagine, and said, look, I can help. And then the widow was able to give back to him. Sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill. He grew worse and worse and finally stopped breathing. She said to Elijah, what do you have against me, man of God? I love this because she actually goes right against God when she says this. What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son? What have you been here for? You've brought my family back to life. You've given us food when we had no food, and now, just because of you, my son dies. Now, of course, it's not because of Elijah that her son died. Maybe her son had a disease. We don't know. Maybe her son was getting on in years and had suffered an injury that kind of turned terminal. We don't know these things. All we know is that she blames Elijah for her misfortune. And through him, she blames God. Now, there have been some days where I honestly have neglected my prayer life with God during this whole circumstance here. And without saying it, I've basically, with my body language, said, God, why would you allow this to happen in the world? God, why would you allow this to happen, especially to good people? I know so many good people right now that don't have a steady income anymore because of this. And by not praying to my master, I'm telling him basically, what have you done this for? Give me your son, Elijah replied. He took him from her arms, carried him into the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his bed. Then he cried out to the Lord, Lord, my God, have you brought tragedy on this widow I am staying with by causing her son to die? Then he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and cried out to the Lord, Lord, my God, let this boy's life return to him. The Lord heard Elijah's cry, and the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elijah picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house. He gave him to his mother and said, Look, your son is alive. Then the woman said to Elijah, Now I know you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth. My first question is, didn't she know that already? Wouldn't she have known that when all of a sudden she made this man that she had never met a loaf of bread, the last loaf of bread she thought that she could make, and now she had way more. She had more loaves of bread. She had more loaves that she could make for her entire family. They would never starve ever again. Wouldn't she know by then? But then you can also turn that question around to yourself. God took care of Elijah because he carried the good news and was a prophet of God. Wouldn't he take care of us because the Holy Spirit resides within each of us? This is a time, and like I talked about in my last video, this is a time for you and I to spread the good news through our actions. When things like this happen, the world likes to turn inward. We like to control our things, ourselves, and control what we can control, right? We like to hoard things. You might have seen things gone from the shelves as an example. We like to hoard things and not give them to people in need because we might need them for ourselves. God, don't you understand that? But during this time is a time that Christians have that's unique. If you're a believer right now, you have a time to actually share what you believe with someone through what you're doing. Give sacrificially. You might think that you need certain things. I might think that I need certain things to stay alive. But what if I come across a need that demands that thing that I need to survive? Well, God took care of Elijah. God took care of the widow. God takes care of the birds. Can't God take care of me? That's so enlightening for me in this time. This is not simply a story of Elijah being taken care of. That would have been really one-dimensional, wouldn't it? The Bible never is one-dimensional. In fact, it actually makes reference to the upper room and him bringing the son upstairs into the room that he was staying in, which happens to be the upper room. If you've read on in the Bible, you know that good things happen in the upper room. This is kind of foreshadowing. So this plays on almost 4 dimensions. But Elijah meets a widow in need and blesses her as well. And she in turn blesses him. Remember, he goes back to God when the son dies and he says, What have you done to this widow? Haven't I come into her life to bless her? And she blessed me, and now her son is dead? What have you done? He can't see the entire picture. Elijah hasn't foreseen this, even as a prophet of God. We all, in our faith journey, have places that we can work. So what do you take away from this today? During this uncertain time, there's many things that you can do. One of the things that doesn't get talked about is supporting your local church. Your churches have closed their doors. These are places that people can go in times of spiritual need to satisfy their needing to be in community. Remember, don't forsake the gathering of yourselves together. We need that intermixed community to help us get through each week. I know that I really take a lot from going to church every Sunday. During this time, everyone spreads something. This is spring. A lot of things are in the air. Every morning I get to the car and I see a new layer of some kind of yellow on the windshield. Nature is spreading something. What are we spreading? Are we spreading fear? Or are we continuing to do what we do? Taking care of our local churches is one of those things. Right now, there are pastors, there are board of elders, there are people wondering inside of the church that really derive their income from the tithes that you and I give, and they are wondering if they can continue to feed their own families. How are we going to continue supporting them? It's important that we do. As you spread things, are you spreading fear? Or are you spreading peace? The peace of God comes with joy. Are you spreading the fruits of the Spirit? Are people able to see you and know during this time that you're different? Do we continue to simply talk about the coronavirus over and over and over again, and new developments and new things going on in the news, and more fear and more worry, and this won't end? Or are we the people that simply say, hey, how are you doing? How can I help you? I promise you that it will be just like Elijah and the widow. When you go out of your way to help someone in need during this time, God will replenish your stores. He'll witness to both of you. He'll witness to you, first of all, the person that's giving everything. And then he'll witness to the person that you gave it to. Both of your houses will be filled with joy and peace, and you will be just fine, because God takes care of his faithful servants. I don't have another story for you today. I just have that one. Next week I'll have Fear Part 3. These will come out pretty much every Sunday, so continue to check this YouTube channel, Canyon Creek Bible Fellowship. Thank you again to everyone that has been really supportive of my last video. If you know someone that any of these videos could help, please spread them on to other people. This is not for monetary benefit at all. This is just to spread the good news of Christ. And lastly, if you yourself do not have a personal relationship with Jesus, there are a couple steps you can take. First of all, seek out someone that does. Ask them questions. Ask them some hard questions. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. And then, if you want to move forward, simply ask God to be a part of your life. You're going to feel a little silly about it at first. You can leave your eyes open. You can leave them closed. That's all kind of a myth anyway. But ask God to be a real part of your life. Confess that you need him more than anything. And I'll see you in eternity. And I'll see you all next week. Thank you.